You are listening to the Project Management Podcast. We bring project management topics to beginners and experts. Find us on the web at pmpodcast.blogspot.com or send your emails to pmpodcast@gmail.com. Hello and welcome to show number 6. I am Cornelius Fichtner. This show was recorded on the 8th of October 2005, and today I have my first guest on the show. This guest is Kristine Hayes Munson, who is the president of the Project Management Institute Orange County Chapter, the PMI OC. I asked Kristine to be on the show today because I have had several email conversations with listeners regarding the PMI. They ask questions like, why should I join the PMI? What skills can I learn as a PMI volunteer? Or what will the PMP certification do for me? And I figured, rather than me pontificating about this subject, I want to bring someone on the show who knows the PMI inside out and who can back up her views on the PMI with personal experience. It did not take me long to decide who I wanted to talk to, because whenever I have a PMI-related question, Kristine is usually my one-stop shop. She knows the PMI inside out. So one day, at the office, I got up, I walked over to my boss, and I said, "Hey, Kristine, how would you feel about doing an interview on my podcast?" She said yes, and here it is.
The Project Management Podcast Feature Interview. Today with Kristine Hayes Munson, Chair of the Project Management Institute Orange County Chapter in California.
Kristine Hayes Munson joined the PMI in 1999, but wasn't very active until she found the PMI OC in 2001. Kristine says, "Choosing to become a PMI OC volunteer was one of my best personal and professional decisions. As a volunteer, she is privileged to work with and learn from countless other PMI OC members. Kristine has served as Vice President of Communications, Vice President of Professional Development, and is the current Chair/President on the board of the PMI OC. Professionally, her project management experience includes a wide range of business process improvement and information technology projects in the finance, printing, and construction industries. Currently, Kristine oversees a team responsible for project portfolio tracking, project management methodology development, standard operating procedure documentation, audit compliance oversight, resource utilization, division intranet development, and senior management reporting for a 145-member financial services technology department. Kristine lives in Vista, California, with her husband and their 3 children." Okay, Kristine. Even though we've been working together for a long time, we've known each other for about, 2.5 years now, something like that?
Probably.
The one thing I never, ever asked you is, you've grown up in Idaho on a farm. How on earth did you ever end up in one of the oldest financial institutions of the United States as a project manager?
Well, first off, I didn't really grow up on a farm. My father taught school until I was 14.
Oops.
And my mother chose not to relocate to live on the farm, so we stayed in the big city of American Falls, which had 3,600 people. Huge, huge, huge city.
Okay.
There's actually stoplights there, in case you're curious. I went to college and was an English major, got a BA in English, and found that it was a very marketable skill. I could work at McDonald's, I could work at Burger King. I chose Kinko's because I would not smell like food after I was through. Actually, I had gone to Kinko's to copy my resume, and they had the big help wanted sign. I'm like, well, you just copied it. Would you like it back?
So what kind of job did you take at Kinko? Probably not as project manager to start you off.
No, I worked at the front counter at Kinko's, making $5 an hour.
Here, I need 20 copies of that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And then from there, I just kind of accidentally fell into working in the desktop publishing area, which was my first introduction to technology beyond just using my PC at home. And so I did desktop publishing for 3 or 4 years using a Macintosh, so I'm a huge Mac fan. I have 2 of those at home. And from there, I just kept climbing the Kinko's corporate ladder and looking for new opportunities to improve what I was doing and to challenge myself and to explore new options. And one of the options that I was able to uncover was the opportunity to go work at Kinko's corporate office and manage the program around their operations manual. And I had always been using project management skills, but I didn't really know what I was doing as a project manager until I went to work at Kinko's corporate office. And I had
kind of like me. I started out using project management skills. I didn't know what it was until I started getting into the profession and getting training.
I had a title and I didn't know what it meant, basically. Like, make this thing happen. I understood that part, but I didn't know what a program project manager was. And I was working for a woman who understood that and pointed me to UCSB, University of California at Santa Barbara. They had an extension program where they were teaching project management. So I basically there were a bunch of us who took it together at a night class on project management 101, from everything on how to write a schedule and use Microsoft Project to more in-depth project management topics. And that lasted about 18 months, and that was the first time I really understood what a project manager was. And through that involvement, I ran into some people who were active in the PMI LA chapter, and they started talking very highly of the Project Management Institute and what it had done for them, and were trying to get me involved in that chapter. And it didn't work out for me at that point in time because of where I was living versus where the LA chapter had their meetings at. So I didn't really participate, but I had actually joined, and so I was getting the magazines from PMI. And then I came to work here in Orange County, and I had a supervisor who encouraged me to go to the dinner meeting, which was like 5 minutes away from our office. And then I just kind of kept going, and that's how I ended up working and doing volunteer work for the PMI.
So your interest in project management didn't really grow from within yourself, but you were kind of thrown into it.
Well, no, I think I always did it. I always was interested in it. I just didn't know I was interested in it. I didn't have a label for what I was doing. I was given a task or something to do, build a presentation and a training program, build an operations manual, build a new pricing structure, whatever it was, and then I would intuitively deconstruct it and break it into tasks and assign things out to people and have the good old-fashioned napkin, right, with the dates on when the project was to be done, but I didn't really know that that's what I was doing, was project management.
So, like many people out there who are project managers in their day-to-day job, but they really don't know that that's what they're doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I see people like that every day.
Yeah. So you got involved in the PMI OC, and little did you know probably then that you would end up as the chair of the PMI OC. How did you start out? I mean, you probably didn't volunteer to become a board member at the very beginning. What was your first volunteer job at the PMI OC?
I volunteered to update the board of directors' job descriptions. They were struggling, trying to figure out whose responsibility it was to do what. And since my forte at that point in time was working on policies and procedures...
Yeah, operations manual, right?
Right, so that was just an easy thing for me to do, and not very hard to knock out. And I had one person on the board who was very opinionated on what the description should be, so that person sent me voluminous emails, and I just graciously accepted the feedback, and they were dead on. I didn't know anything. I didn't know what they were supposed to do, so I just incorporated all that feedback and just kept sending it back out and said, look at it again. And they kept sending me feedback, and eventually we got it done. And they liked it well enough that when someone had left the board of directors, within a couple of weeks after that, they called me up and said, hey, how'd you like to be on the board? And I was like even more naive and said, okay. Whatever.
Kind of like how I got my board position. Somebody left and I got approached. Hey, wouldn't you want to be? And yes. Naively, I said yes as well.
But you had been around the organization a little longer than me. I think I had gone to maybe 4 dinner meetings or 5. And
I'd been around for about a year, 1.5 years before I got approached for that position. So in your opinion, what does the PMI do for project managers?
It does for project managers whatever project managers want it to do.
That is very well said.
Because I
Diplomatic.
know. Well, it's true. We have approximately 1,500 members now in the Orange County chapter. Some of them choose not to actively participate. I don't even know if they open up the newsletter. They might just be using it to pad their resume. I don't know why those people choose to join, but they are out there. Mm-hmm. And I was one of those people for a long time, and I didn't participate because of just the logistics of travel, getting back and forth. It didn't work. So I understand that person. I was that person. And then there's the person who wants to come and just participate in the educational programming. And I was that person for a while, too. I just wanted to sit and learn and listen and not really get involved. And then there's the person who chooses to volunteer and learn skill sets by volunteering. Mm-hmm. And it's a choice. You have to decide what you want to get out of the Project Management Institute.
That's a nice segue. One of the people who listens to my podcast, his name is Chuck Tomasi. He actually sent me a couple of questions for you to ask here in this interview. And one of the questions was focused on the skill set. He was wondering, what skills does the PMI teach a project manager?
Again, anything you really want to get out of it. What I think the primary skills that most people who choose to participate either in the educational programming or as a volunteer get are first and foremost networking. You learn how to talk to other people in your field and to exchange ideas. If you go and don't talk to anyone and just sit in the back corner, you probably aren't coming again. The people who come over and over again learn to talk to each other and share ideas and meet new contacts. The other skills you can get through volunteering are almost infinite. For example, I managed my first website development project as a volunteer for the Project Management Institute of Orange County, and you always laugh because it has some interesting hidden flaws in the back of the website. You may
very well think so. I couldn't possibly comment.
But on the other hand, I was able to make those mistakes and learn from those issues in a relatively safe and supportive environment and ask questions that I might not have felt as comfortable asking in my professional situation. And then when the time came for me to manage web development projects professionally, I had a background and I at least knew where to start and have hopefully learned from the mistakes I made.
Right.
And because the Orange County chapter, as well as all the other components out there, are run by volunteers, you can pretty much decide what skill set do I need to work on as a project manager, and then volunteer to develop that skill set. If you need to volunteer to improve your writing ability, you can volunteer to write for a newsletter. If you need to work on organizing and coming up with tasks and projects really quickly, volunteer to be on the dinner meeting committee because you have to do that every month and it's a project a month. It comes really quickly and the deadline is hard and can't change. So you can pick your skill set that you want to work on.
Mm-hmm. If you had to give it a guess, how many hours do you invest?
I usually guesstimate that it's about 40 hours a month.
Yeah, okay.
And that includes things like responding to emails, attending events, attending the board meeting, and then occasionally running a small project as chair. I try not to run very many projects because that defeats the purpose of being chair, but occasionally you just have to because it's a volunteer organization and somebody has to do it.
Yeah. And of course at this point we have to add that you're at the upper end of the volunteer hours per month, just because there are people probably listening to this interview who are interested in the PMI, who want to volunteer. There are also jobs out there that take an hour or less per month.
Absolutely. For example, we have a couple of people who come to our dinner meeting religiously every month, and they work the registration desk. They take maybe an hour, hour and a half sitting on the registration desk. They get to see everyone who comes to the door, have a conversation with everyone, so they get to expand their professional network. They get to eat the dinner and see the speaker, and then they're done. That's their commitment level, and that fits in their schedule, and that's what they need.
Yeah, and me as programs director, I'm actually trying to create such positions intentionally, positions that are very small in focus, so that new volunteers can come in and to actually do exactly that, volunteer a little bit.
And absolutely, and volunteers don't have to think that I volunteer for a while and then I have to be on the board of directors and then make this huge commitment of time. You can volunteer at any level for as long as you want, without ever sitting on the board of directors. I know people for the Orange County chapter who have volunteered much longer than I've even been practicing project management professionally since the beginning of the chapter almost, that they just do it because they love it and they don't have any aspirations of ever being on the board of directors.
You mentioned that it helped you expand your skills in terms of website project management. Any other skills that you have learned personally in your positions? I know you've been on the board for quite a few years now, and you've been in various positions.
Right, this is my 5th year on the board. The biggest skill set that I've learned that I had never really explored at all, and I never really seem to have the opportunity to at this point in time professionally yet, is strategic planning. Because being on the board of directors, you need to not only focus on the day-to-day operations, but also being looking forward to what do we want to be in 3 years, what do we want to be in 5 years, and looking forward. And I've been given an opportunity to learn in a relatively safe environment by actually hands-on doing some strategic planning processes. I don't claim I'm an expert yet, but I certainly know more about it than when I started. The other thing I've learned a lot about is leadership. I was lucky enough to attend or be selected to attend the Project Management Institute's Leadership Institute class that they have. And that was a hand-selected group of 25 component leaders from around the world. And we met face-to-face 3 times and then did some work in between the sessions. And it was really interesting to hear their discussions and learn about how to become a leader through the discussions. And probably one of the most revealing things that we did was we did a 360 review where both my supervisor, my peers, the people who are my direct reports gave me feedback, and that was a really interesting experience.
How did you ever get involved or interested in the leadership seminar?
There was a woman who was the chair of the PMIOC right before me who received and one of the mass mail emails from PMI saying it's time for this program, and she had participated in a very similar program through her employer many years ago, and she said this was just fabulous. This was something I really needed at that point in time. And she said, she told me, Kristine, you really need to do this, that it's the right time for you to do this. And so at her encouragement, I applied and was lucky to be chosen.
Right. When we were in Toronto a little while ago, I also made 2 shows from there, and one item that I talked about was the fact that the Leadership Institute is going to be replaced or substituted, or I'm not quite sure what they're doing, with PMI Learn. Have you been able to really figure out what it is that's happening?
Sort of. The PMI did the Leadership Institute as an experimental program for the past couple of years.
Yes.
They understood that the marketplace was saying that project managers needed to be not only managers and really good at managing things, but more importantly, project managers needed to be leaders. They needed to have a sense of vision. They needed to see beyond what they were managing and look towards the big picture and how did it all fit together.
Yes.
And knowing that that was the marketplace, they created this experimental program called Leadership Institute, where they gathered a group of people together and worked on developing those individuals as leaders. And they limited the class size purposely to 25. Well, 25 people, and now PMI itself has 200,000 members. It's not really a great return on your investment to only invest in 25 people. So what they decided to do is to try to figure out how to expand the leadership program overall and then still have some face-to-face and still not lose the
Will they keep the institute going with the 25 per year?
So what they're going to do is they're going to have this PM Learn, which is going to be an online tool that the majority of the beginning entry-level, especially entry-level board-level volunteers can participate in. So you can learn things like fiduciary responsibility, duty of care.
Okay, so it's not for all the 200,000, it's just for the component leaders.
It's primarily for the component leaders, but I don't know if other volunteers can access it or not, because to be honest, I have not had an opportunity to log in yet.
Neither have I. So.
Then they're going to augment that with the leadership conferences, which they now offer, was it 3-4 times a year in conjunction with each of the various global congresses. So that's an established program, and their goal there is to have as many component leaders at the board of director levels in each component attend those as possible and participate in seminars. And that was what you were participating in Toronto, that you were interviewing people at. And then associated with those, they want to have a Leadership Institute class of 25 that are doing kind of the capstone training for really, truly advanced people. And they want to have a session both in North America, they want one in Europe, I think they're talking about one in Asia, and I'm not sure about Latin America. Okay. And they've got a calendar of when they're going to start. And so what the Leadership Institute experience will be, that the capstone class is going to be probably very different, because they want to do it in not just English. They want to be sensitive to the fact that the whole world, English is not their primary language.
Yes, of course.
And so how it actually works and how it translates, because
it's probably going to be difficult to take the Leadership Institute and try to roll it out to all the, how many thousand component leaders are there?
They estimate 6,000 component leaders. And that, of course, is
impossible.
That's the board of director levels. They aren't looking at the people who really make the components work, the other volunteers. So, for example, in PMIOC, we have 9 people who sit on the board of directors and 120, give or take, active volunteers at any one point in time. Those 9 people on the board of directors are not making the chapter work. It's everybody else that's out there making it work.
Now, you've graduated from the Institute in Toronto this year. And do you feel better prepared as a leader? Has it helped you?
I think I am more aware of questioning things about why I'm doing things. And looking inside and seeing, am I behaving as a leader? Am I behaving as a manager? Am I choosing to be a follower at any point in time? And also, it has made me much more sensitive to observing leadership in others and trying to incorporate that leadership ability within myself.
Okay.
Or observing the lack of leadership ability in others and trying to avoid making those same type of mistakes. One of the most beneficial activities that we did is we kept a leadership learning journal.
And you're still keeping that, right?
Not as regularly as it was, but I do have it with me. I got it in my bag, actually. But to sit, and the instructor recommended to write 3 pages a day.
Wow. Whatever
Whatever you want to write about.
Did he say what font size you're supposed to use?
Well, we have a running joke. One of my colleagues who was in the Leadership Institute class with me has significantly larger handwriting than mine. So she's getting ready to move on to her 3rd, and I'm only in the middle of my 2nd leadership journal right now, and I keep telling her that mine is more text than hers, and she always laughs at that.
Let me come back to something that you said earlier at this point. You mentioned that you hadn't really done anything in the terms of strategic planning. However, I know that you've worked on the bylaws of the PMIOC. You've completely revamped them a little while ago. I think they were implemented in 2004, right? And this is the 1st year. So how did you come about doing that?
The bylaws and strategic planning are related, sort of. When I first joined the board of directors, I really didn't know much about strategic planning. And as a board of directors, the PMIOC had not really done much strategic planning at the point in time that I joined. We had a president at that point in time. Her name is Cindy Snyder. And Cindy was very adamant about we needed to start thinking strategically. And that was about the time that PMI itself started talking about boards behaving more strategically rather than being the project manager or the program manager for every daily operation.
Right.
So Cindy instituted a program for the board to go off-site and do some serious strategic planning. And she brought on a woman named Victoria Flanagan. And Victoria has been sort of the brains behind how we all started our strategic planning processes. In her professional background, I think she had some strategic planning experience. And so she helped bring a framework to bear and kind of helped teach us all how to do strategic planning. And over time, those off-sites have continued and the planning processes has expanded, and we've all just kind of learned as we've gone. And we've also, as a board, participated in how-to strategic planning sessions at various leadership conferences, at the North American Leadership Conference and then at the Region 7 Leadership Conference. Region 7 is a group of components here in California, Arizona, New Mexico. So we've learned as we've gone, and it's been an interesting journey to figure out what is strategic versus what is operational, and sometimes there's that gray area in the middle that we still haven't figured out how to really deal with. One of the things through strategic planning that we noticed is that our bylaws were not going to get us to where we wanted to be in 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
We had some overlapping responsibilities, and we also had the issue of the programs director, for example, being the program manager for the dinner meeting, and their primary functionality was the day-to-day operations of the dinner meeting, not saying, so what programs or educational opportunities should I be offering my membership in the future?
Didn't we also have the overlap between the programs director and the VP of education?
Professional
development, exactly. That
so
these two people
that's a
were
perfect
always
example.
fighting.
We had it wasn't really a fight, but it was always a discussion. Whenever there was a new program that was being proposed, who owned it?
Who is responsible for the program? It's programs? No, it's professional development.
Yeah,
so
it became an interesting discussion, and the discussion varied every year based on who held those positions. So it became obvious that we needed to figure out how to allow the board of directors to be more strategic and not be doing the day-to-day operations, and letting other people have the opportunity to learn the skills they needed by doing the daily operations. So we looked at the bylaws, and we spent a lot of time with the bylaws, and it was a much more painful process than I had ever envisioned that it would be, because every time we talked about board structure, for example, we talked about all the ramifications of, well, what does this mean? Is this position too large? Is it not large enough? Will we really be able to get a strong group of leaders underneath the board who can make the day-to-day operations happen while the board can look strategically? How far do the strategic right, or do we want to go versus the left of the operations? And we had kind of a continuum that we tried to focus on. And the reality is we kind of came up, hopefully, with what is a compromise in the middle, realizing that we couldn't be 100% strategic yet because we still needed to develop that next level of leadership.
Okay. Now, looking back to the changes in the bylaws, did you achieve your goal? Was the outcome the way you wanted it to be?
I'm honestly not certain yet.
How long have they been in effect? About a year?
They went into effect on January 1.
Okay.
And the reason I'm not certain is because I stayed on as chair and kind of try to help get through the change between the board structures. But I'm not sure. The true test is next year when someone else is guiding the helm, if it stands up. And even the truer test is when those of us who participate in that discussion, especially me and a couple other key people who are still on the board, are no longer on the board, if it really works, because we all understood.
It stands up to the test of time.
Yeah, we understood what it meant when we did it.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that we do are because of the discussions that we had and we understood when we were playing together. Now, when someone who is in charge and on the board who has not participated in those discussions has to live with them, it'll be interesting to see how they interpret them and if it really fits for them. And my anticipation is that within 3 to 5 years that they'll have to be revised again, because we took that middle road of the fact that we couldn't be 100% strategic.
Yes.
And my personal vision of what I would love to see happen is that the level of volunteer leaders beneath the board of directors becomes much stronger. It gets filled with really strong people who are very passionate about what they do, who may or may not want to be on the board of directors someday. And then the board of directors truly frees itself from daily operations and begins to really, truly look strategic. And then instead of having a programs director, then everybody is a director at large, just looking forward, sort of like the PMI board does. The PMI board is, all their titles are director at large, and some of them have other committee responsibilities, but they aren't doing the day-to-day operations that's being done by somebody else.
So you don't have a marketing director anymore. You have a marketing team out there who would take care of marketing, while the directors
work on the strategic.
Right, and then those people come and give reports periodically and say,
Right.
yes, we are marketing, yes, we
We're
are
moving forward.
running programs, and
Yeah.
the board of directors comes back and says, we have see a niche that we need this type of educational opportunity filled, and the programs director comes back, who's not a member of the board of directors, but
Yeah.
the program chair comes back and says, I have done this.
So almost actually a double board, a strategic board on one side, and underneath it the tactical board.
No, it's not
essentially.
really a board. It's more of a senior management team. So
Oh,
you
okay.
have a board and
That
then a
works.
senior management team,
Yeah.
like you do in a for-profit organization,
Yeah.
or in larger not-for-profits. Would have a board and then
with
have an
the
executive
senior managers
director and a
underneath it.
senior
Yeah,
manager
okay.
underneath.
Makes a lot of sense. Now, if you had to give advice to another chapter who's thinking about revising their bylaws, what advice would you give them? Where are the pitfalls?
The first advice I give them is to read what PMI has for the PMI bylaws, and then PMI also has a sample set of component bylaws. We use those very heavily. And then you have to know what you want to be when you grow up. You have to have some sort of a strategic vision of what you want these bylaws to accomplish. And then you have to find someone who is anal retentive and will sit for hours and write the things.
How long did it take from the first idea to the actual implementation?
It was a year process because
Wow.
we spent the first 8 months of last year working on them, and had to have PMI's review. We went and got legal counsel and had that review.
PMI supported you in that, right? Or did you get a local legal counsel?
We got
first?
a legal counsel here in the state of California
Okay.
because we wanted to make sure we were compliant with California
all right.
laws. So we did that, and then we had to present it to the membership and have the membership vote on it. So the membership voted on it in August, in time for us to have our October elections based on that new board model. And then we revamped the board job descriptions, and then we kind of had to plan in our offsite, and we didn't really start implementing how it all worked until January 1.
Okay. If you compare the PMIOC to other chapters that you've seen, where do we stand in comparison to them?
That's a hard question because there's a lot of components out there of varying sizes.
All right, then let me rephrase the
If
question.
there's for the components that are larger than us, there are some out there that far exceed what we do.
Right.
They have bigger budgets, they have more volunteers, and we try to find those people when we go to the leadership conferences, seek them out, steal all their good ideas, or leverage all of their good ideas and try to implement as many as we can. For chapters who are our same size category, I think we're as good as any you'll see.
Right. What does our chapter do that you'd say, this is where other chapters could learn from us?
The most important thing that keeps our chapter going is the volunteers.
Okay.
We have a core of probably about 120 active volunteers in
Out of
1,500
1,500 members, right?
Out of
So that's
1,500
slightly less
members.
than 10%. Okay.
But it's still a large
Yeah.
number of people. We have people who volunteer an immense amount of time, and some of the people who volunteer the most time are not even on the board of directors.
Yeah, that's true.
When we have people who volunteer very infrequently as an ambassador and come and just greet people at dinner meeting. It all depends on what they're able to give. And we work very hard to try to recognize our volunteers. We have a Volunteer of the Month program where every month we recognize someone who has contributed to the chapter. We try to recognize people who are doing really big things as well as people who are doing really small things. Because we don't want to say, well, you only get recognized if you spend hundreds and hundreds of hours, because
Right.
that's not true. We do try to recognize that, but we also want to recognize that ambassador who comes consistently month after month after month and gives us an hour of their time, because that's important to us as someone who's doing a bigger project. And then we also have a volunteer recognition activity once a year where we invite the volunteer and a guest. Sometimes we've invited volunteers and their families. It just kind of depends on what the activity is and what our budget will allow based on what the activity is. And that's always really fun because you get a chance to see the volunteer and someone who is close to them, so that it's usually
Get to know the family.
The family. It's usually a family member who accompanies them, either a spouse, a a significant other or even an older child. And
Right.
it's nice for them to say, oh, this is the person who you talked to me about, and for them to say, this is the person who you talked to. And we can start putting connections together, and it helps build the family feeling. Recently, we've started doing a volunteer kickoff meeting where we get the volunteers together at the beginning of every year and say, this is what our goals and initiatives are, and let's talk about how we can work together to make that happen.
Okay.
And then we also involve them in our planning process towards the end of the year, where we invite some of our key volunteers to come and give us as the board of directors feedback on the direction that they would like to see the chapter go. And to me, that's one of the most invaluable experiences, because a lot of times people will say, well, aren't you prejudiced because the board of directors are there and they want to say only nice things? No, our volunteers are brutally honest, and they tell you exactly what they're thinking, even if you don't want to hear it.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that sense of involvement in the whole process keeps them coming.
Volunteers are key to
Absolutely.
the success of a chapter. All right, let's turn the question around. Where could the PMI OC learn from other chapters? Where do we have to go out and seek help from others?
We're really struggling right now with our customer relationship management problems. We know we have members, and we know we have events. We do not know if the same members are coming to every event, or if a different set of members comes to every event. We have observational data, but we don't have any quantifiable data that we can really do any analysis on and make decisions about what type of programming we should be offering in the future. And we also, because of that, are kind of hindered in some of the marketing messages we can tailor to people who have attended events. You've done a lot of work this year to manually make some email distribution lists so that you can target some messages that we needed to go out, but we don't have a good system to do that for people, and we're really struggling with that.
Yeah. Looking back at the effort that you have put into PMI versus the benefit for you personally, would you do it again? Would you become chair again? Absolutely. What did it do for you? The number one thing that being in the PMI did for you?
I got to work and got to know a lot of really good people. When I first went to my first dinner meeting, I absolutely hated it because I do not like going and working a room. I am not one of those people who's going to come out with 30 business cards and remember your name the next time.
Yeah.
And the second dinner meeting I went was even worse because the people I met from the first time didn't seem to appear the second time, and it was a very frustrating experience. And then once I started to volunteer, I got to know people, and now when I go to a dinner meeting or go to any PMIOC activity, it's like seeing family, a family of choice. There are people that I know and people that I respect, and when I have questions both professionally and personally, I have no qualms picking up the phone and calling people that I know from PMI who can help me out. And whenever I have a vacancy on my team, the last couple that I've had to fill, I've been able to go to my PMI OC contacts and say, I'm looking to fill this position, and not that every opportunity that we've hired for has been a member of PMI OC, but they've helped point me in the right direction to where I should post my job postings with other professional associations who have that type of skill set.
So that works the other way around too, right? So if you are a volunteer in the PMI, people will get to know you, and people will find you if a job opens up.
Absolutely.
As is proven by myself, because I found my job through the PMI. All right. And what advice would you give current and future presidents/chairs of PMI chapters? That's a big question, I know.
That is a big question. This year's chair-elect and I went out to dinner last night and talked about it a little bit, and I didn't have any good answers for him either. The thing that I learned, which was the hardest lesson for me to learn as chair, was I didn't control anything. In my professional role, when I manage a team, and I can go to a team member and I can say, you're on this project. You are no longer on this project. Somebody else is doing this project, or we're going to kill this project. And I can make decisions, and then people theoretically go off and do what my instructions are. as a chair of the board, it's very much a consensus thing. And if there's something that I personally don't like in a project that I personally don't agree with, if the consensus of the group is that it needs to occur, then it will occur. And I cannot personally just go to someone and say, that doesn't work, get rid of that project.
Right.
And I have learned that the chair just basically has to keep everybody moving forward in a direction that the group agrees on.
So you give guidelines and...
Well, the group just sets its own guidelines,
Right.
and so the chair needs to keep the group going towards its own destiny of what it's decided it wants to be, towards its own plan.
So you're
But the
basically
chair-
telling us that the chair is powerless.
Absolutely. The true power lies in the individual directors who are making the day-to-day decisions. And then the chair hopefully is there to coach
Right.
and mentor and influence and help point people in the right directions. But in reality, each individual has to make their own choices. And that's been a very hard lesson for me to learn.
Okay. And what do you take away from your 2 years as chair now?
Mm-hmm.
What is the one thing that's going to stay with you for the rest of your life?
Oh, wow, that's a hard.
Once
question.
again, a big question. Yeah.
I don't know. I read a commencement speech that Steve Jobs gave. I think it was at Stanford. I could be incorrect about the university. Where he talked about how he had a variety of experiences when he was going to college that he had no idea would be meaningful. And the one specifically that stuck into my mind is he took a calligraphy class just because he wanted to, because he was interested in it. And because he learned about how how fonts worked and how letters worked together, when they went around to building the Macintosh, that influenced how he built that. But he made the point that he had no idea by taking this calligraphy class that would influence the product that he made. And I would feel very similarly. I don't really know what experiences will come back to benefit me because I don't know where my life is going to go. And I find that same experience happening to me. Things that I did in high school come back to benefit me now that I didn't realize would even be important.
It's a huge playground, and you're playing the whole field, and who knows what is going to benefit you in the future. Yeah, I can see that. One other question that Chuck Tomasi sent me was about benefits. What benefits will a project manager get out of becoming a PMP?
The reason I got my PMP was because I was getting ready to job hunt. And in my preliminary job searches, I noticed that to get into many of the project management jobs I was interested in, that it said PMP required or PMP preferred. It didn't take me long to figure out that it was pretty painless to get the PMP versus it was more painful to be denied just getting past the gateway. And I understand that a lot of times it's just used by recruiters and HR people as a gate check thing to get you through the door. But I was not going to allow myself to be caught because I didn't have one. That, I think, is probably one of its primary benefits.
To put it on your resume?
To put it on your resume and to get in the door. A secondary benefit is the knowledge that you get by studying for the test. Now, I understand that people will disagree and say the things that you study are not necessarily what you would do in real life. I've heard all those arguments, and I made some of those arguments myself. But to really have to spend some time with the theory of project management and understand it empowers you as a professional to say, you know what, I understand that I should be doing this at this stage, but due to time constraints, due to whatever reason, I choose not to. And I accept the risks of not doing that, and I understand that I have not done that.
And, of course, it's the usual. It gives you the common language, the common ground. You can better talk to other people as well, right?
And then the third benefit of it, absolutely, well, actually, that would be the third benefit. And the fourth benefit would be it encourages you to continue your learning.
Ah, yes.
Be it through classes at a university, classes offered by local PMI components, classes offered by other training firms that specialize in project management training, PMI and the Global Congress, seminars world.
How do you get your own PDUs, professional development units?
I get them in a mixture of ways. very little of them actually, believe it or not, comes from actually volunteering. Most of them comes from attending things like the dinner meetings, because you get 1 PDU per dinner meeting, and then different conferences that the chapter has sponsored. And then the last couple years, I have been able to attend PMI's Global Congress, which is like a huge, massive dose of PDUs.
3 days, right?
Yeah.
Worth of
very
of
intense,
PDUs.
very intense. But very interesting to see the different levels of project management. Because one of the disadvantages of getting your PMP is it doesn't necessarily mean you're competent at what you do.
Yes.
It means that in many ways that you have the knowledge, but not necessarily the competency. And when you go to things like the Global Congress or some of the larger events, you see the difference in competency levels. Again, it goes back to the same thing we were talking about with leadership. I think because I've been involved in PMIOC, I'm more in tune to saying, oh, there's a person who I want to emulate, and that's a great skill, and I want to pick that person's brain and understand what they're doing and be able to implement it in my own professional career, versus that person's full of who knows what, and they've never really managed a project before, and I'm just going to ignore them.
Okay. How do you feel about the CAPM? What is it? Certified Associate in Project Management?
I can't remember what the acronym stands for. I understand intellectually where PMI is trying to go. The reality out in the field is that I've only had, in the 2 years that I've been answering the chair emails, and then before that I was answering our general info at pmi-oc.org email box, I have only received one inquiry, to my knowledge, of someone who is interested in the certification. One of the problems is that employers are not looking for that certification, and that's what really made the PMP's demand swell, is because employers, other people figured out like I did, get the PMP, get you past the hoop, and still until professional businesses and their pressure start saying, I want the CAPM certification, then people aren't necessarily going to do it. And so,
coming back to job ads, or is it just me, or do you see this as well, that it's changing from PMP preferred to PMP required?
Absolutely, because especially for the people who want to be able to market that to their own external clients, they want to be able to say, my project manager is certified, or put it on the response to an RFP that I have certified project management staff.
Right. So CAPM probably more for somebody almost fresh out of school who knows, I want to get into project management, takes the CAPM test and the training, and then starts moving up in the career towards the PMP. What's beyond the PMP?
That's a question that I've heard thrown around a lot lately, and PMI I don't think has an answer for that at this point. I know they're doing a lot of research and trying to figure out what it should be. And again, it goes to the idea of the PMP being a knowledge-based certification versus a competency certification. And how do you test, measure, evaluate competency is a whole other issue that I know that they've been discussing, but I don't know where they're at in that process.
Okay. Let's end the interview with the final 10. The 10 standard questions that I intend to ask everybody at the end of the interview. So, here we go. Number 1. What was your favorite project?
Managing an operations manual project at Kinko's that had been stalled for a long time, and I was finally able to get executive support on board and get it out the door.
You must have succeeded.
I did. I managed to turn it around. After I got it, I managed to turn around in 6 months and get it out the door.
Good. Number 2. What project would you like to have managed?
I went to a presentation once about the Global Congress about building an oil refinery, and that was just wild. And you know what, that would just be a wild challenge. That would be fun.
Number 3. What is your favorite project management book?
Lately, I've been reading mostly about leadership topics. And believe it or not, the book that I would recommend about leadership right now is a science fiction book by Orson Scott Card called Ender's Game.
I read that. Number 4. What is the topic of the next seminar that you're planning to attend?
Tuesday night dinner meeting, but I don't know what the topic is. I know I have to give a presentation, but I don't know what the topic is.
Number 5. What is the best way to make a project fail?
Not have executive support. You got to have management support.
Number 6. How do you like to celebrate a successful project?
Food.
Yep, that certainly works. Number 7, in your projects, where do you focus most of your attention in order to be successful?
The people.
Number 8, if you weren't a project manager, what would you like to be?
A pianist.
Number 9, what is the one thing that a project manager cannot live without?
Their ears.
Their ears.
You have to listen to what the people are telling you.
Okay. Number 10, finally, the oldest question in project management. What is more important in a project manager? Project management expertise or industry expertise?
It depends. I think it depends on the risk level of the project, and if not, having how those two skill sets play together.
Right.
If you're going to seriously risk someone's life because you don't have enough engineering background to build whatever you're going to build, then that's definitely an issue. But if you're not going to kill somebody, then I think it's fine.
It depends.
It all depends.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I enjoyed talking to you today.
Thank you.
That's it for today. Thanks for listening. In my next show, I will be starting out a Dear Diary section. I have just started a new project at work, and with my Dear Diary, you'll be able to follow along. As always, you can find us on the web at pmpodcast.blogspot.com or send your emails to pmpodcast@gmail.com. And when you write, please tell me where in the world you are writing from. And finally, we have this. Any project can be estimated accurately once it is completed. With that, why don't you read the project management book this week? Until next time.